Hello, it's good to see you again. Thanks for stopping by. Now, I'm going to try something here. I recently became a dad, and my little boy is sleeping over there. I've never tried to film a video with him sleeping in the room, but he finds the sound of my voice very comforting, so it could be a good combination. Let's give it a try. Now, 2024 was an amazing reading year for me, and it was quite hard to narrow down many of the wonderful books that I read into a select 10, but these really were the 10 that had me dancing in the waves like a dolphin, that had me shooting lightning bolts from my ears like Pikachu. Thank you all for being here this year, my first 9 months or something like that of this channel. It's been so much fun. It's been inspiring. I've had an amazing reading year, and I think it's largely due to the enthusiasm of you guys. What are your top 10 reads of the year? I would love to hear from you. So let's dive into it without further ado. First up, I've got Macbeth by William Shakespeare. I'm going to leave a link to videos in which I've talked about these books. This was a reread for me, but what a blood-curdling, spooky, nightmarish, blood-soaked horror this play is. I think it's Shakespeare really showing the darker tones of his capacious mind. Of course, Hamlet is another play with very, very dark undercurrents and overtones as well. But I reread Macbeth, and it's just got some of the most memorable lines: tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, the sound and the fury. It was Freud's favorite play, understandably so, because it really is this battle of conscience and consciousness and subconscious urge, desire, animalistic hunger for power. But Shakespeare draws these characters in such multivalent complexity that we can't help but identifying ourselves even with the most ice-veined ruthlessness and unrelenting rapaciousness that is embodied in Lady Macbeth and in Macbeth himself. It was a wonder to reread this play. Next, I've got Jane Austen, Mansfield Park. Now, this was the last book of Austen's that I had not read, and I finally can say that I'm an Austen completist. Of course, we have her 6 major novels, but she also had a bunch of juvenilia that I've read, as well as some letters. I'm going to make a video in 2025, like going through all of Austen's works, which I very much look forward to. But Mansfield Park, this was the missing piece in my reading of Austen's body of work, and it was worth the wait. It is magnificent. Fanny Price is this one pitiable but resolutely virtuous heroine who, despite all the buffets and blows and vicissitudes and caprices of fortune that she deals with, she manages to be true to her values, and she's just a very lovable character. And this novel has been massively criticized. It's probably a sort of unfashionable pick in terms of Austen discourse or Jane Austen scholarship or whatever. It's been lambasted by post-colonial critics for its kind of tacit reliance upon empire and colonization for the wealth that furnishes the lives and the settings of these characters. But Fanny Price herself is poor and comes from poverty, and is this little girl who's taken in by a wealthy family on charity. She's an extended relative of the family, and she's treated so wretchedly by certain members of that family. It's a real lesson to learn in the contradictions and the paradoxes of charity, that what is given can also be very costly if it is given conditionally, and also the perceptibility of small children, how perceptive they are to injustice and to the blind and lazy biases of adults with power in their grip. Critics, scholars have argued about Jane Austen's position in regards to like feminism and the figure of the domestic female heroine. And at the end of the day, that's interesting as far as scholarship goes, but in terms of art, in terms of high literary value, the very ambiguity, the very ambivalence of Austen narrating this story, and of her authorial intent, and of the characters and their moral frameworks and the actions that unfold in the story. The fact that we can discuss it for hundreds of years and posit various arguments or theoretical perspectives speaks to the power of the novel itself. Art is not beholden to what is in vogue or to a particular viewpoint. True high art is a vast tapestry of endless possible readings, and there is ambivalence and contradiction and aporias, unsolvable contradictions within great art, and that is what makes it endlessly revisitable. And Jane Austen is an exemplar of that multifaceted depth charge of high art. I absolutely loved Mansfield Park. I don't care that it's been lambasted. It's a brilliant novel. It doesn't have to give you the socio-political answers that you want. It just has to be a vivid, revivifying tsunami of experiential power, and that is exactly what it is. Next, I've got Ariel by Maurois. I'll also link to the video in which I discussed this. Now, I started a series on this channel that is called Reading the First 3,000 Penguins, and I will, go check it out if you're interested in that. We're going to read all 3,000. We've covered about 50 of them so far, so it's a journey that will take us a lifetime, but that's what the love of reading and bookish life is all about. I therefore won't say a huge amount about this book, despite having at one point in my life reasonably good French. I massacred his name, the pronunciation of his name in that video, so now's my chance to make up for it. Maurois and Ariel. This is a biography of Percy Bysshe Shelley, and it is delightful. It is so rich in narrative. It feels like a novel. Now, Maurois does take massive poetic liberties that you wouldn't get away with today in the field of biography, but that kind of makes it fun as well. He enters the mouths and the minds of Mary Shelley and of Lord Byron and of course Percy Bysshe Shelley himself, and reconstructs this living, breathing wild ride that was Percy Bysshe Shelley's life. It was full of daring and danger and flights of fancy and deep, deep, irreparable sorrow and loss of beloved people, including several children. So it's not light reading. It's also flawed in many ways. I don't think it does justice to Mary Shelley herself, but it is such a fun, freewheeling ride, and gives you definitely a really, really illuminating glimpse into the life and into the poetry of Percy Bysshe Shelley. So, like I said, check out the link in which I talked about this book. Check out the rest of the series. This is number 1, by the way. Number 1. I should have mentioned that at the start of this little section, but this is number 1 in the first 3,000. This was published in 1935. I've got here a 1985 50th year edition reprint. Very beautiful. And absolutely loved this. And I hadn't read it before. Didn't know much about it or about Maurois. And what a great book. Highly recommend. I've also talked about this book in the same series. This is Eric Linklater's Poet's Pub. This was also in the first 3,000. A few of these books are in the Penguin first 3,000. This one was number 3. And we've also talked about it. It is so funny and so witty and so quirky, filled with rich and arcane vocabulary, and it's also got a kind of low-speed chase with a massive, bulky tourist bus of sorts called a charabanc. You don't get those anymore. Through the Yorkshire moors and into Scotland. It's got a lot of great literary references. You kind of feel like in some way it's a retelling of Chaucer, in the sense that it's set in a kind of pub setting in which an eclectic group of misfits and characters come together and tell stories and get up to mischief. It's absolutely delightful. I can't wait to reread this. I'm so happy that I discovered it. Do check it out. Eric Linklater, Poets Pub. Then I've got Lucky Jim by Kingsley Amis. Now, this book was also in 3000, number 1648. We haven't actually talked about it in the series, but I did discuss it in one of my penguin videos, my favorite penguins of all time or something like that. It's so unbelievably funny. It's the original campus novel. It's got some of the best writing about drunkenness that you could ever come across. It is sardonic, it is mordant, it is bitingly dry and ironic and incredibly zesty, sparkling intelligence and humor. And if you've ever worked in academia or thinking about working in academia, this book is just so funny at capturing like the mundanities and the inanities and the kind of redundancies of some of the practices that one must enact as an academic. So Lucky Jim Dixon, he is like a kind of accidental historian. He's a professor of history and of the Middle Ages or early modern period, and he hates it. He kind of stumbled into this career, and he ends up trying desperately to publish an academic paper about like farming equipment from 1330 to 1380 in England, and he's like, no one cares, literally no one cares, and I'm desperately trying to get this thing published. It's so funny and relatable. Next, I've got Graham Greene, The Quiet American. So I'm a big fan of Greene, but this was actually the first time that I'd read The Quiet American, and it's a pretty strong contender to be my favorite Graham Greene novel. It does that brilliant melding of historical context and geopolitical instabilities, melded, interwoven with personal and interpersonal conflicts, identity, emotional and affective states, love triangle, very Greenian. If you read a lot of Graham Greene, he said, if you read a lot of my novels, you end up in Greenland. But Greenland is a good place to be. It's very stark. It's very cynical at times. It's a bit embittered, but it is also brazenly brave and commendably driven towards finding the truth and towards uncovering historical atrocities and representing individual lives caught in the maelstrom of history. And it's a dark topic. It covers the Vietnam War. It's set in Saigon, a city that I know very well. Spent almost a year living in Saigon, in what is now called Ho Chi Minh City. And it's very foreshadowing. This book was published long before the American debacle in Vietnam, and it shows the danger of the sort of American global enterprise of democratization and of this kind of manifest destiny when these Western ideals don't always fit with an ancient culture very far removed, with roots very far removed from the Western system. And that is one of the lessons of this incredible, powerful novel. But it's very touching, it's very brutal, it's very well balanced, it's funny, it's philosophically ruminative, and it's just written so superbly. It's very Graham Greene. You feel, you sort of live and breathe in these like highly wrought but deftly delivered sentences that feel like you're in the hands of a master, and that is always a very thrilling experience. Then I've got another book from the Penguin 3000. This one, that's what I love about these kind of series. This is number 2618, I think, from the first 3000 Penguins. And this is why I love that kind of series, because this is an out-of-print book. It's an anthology of South African writings, poems, non-fiction, and short stories by a range of largely forgotten and underappreciated South African writers. And I have a deep connection with South Africa. I spent many years of my life there, even though I wasn't actually born there. This book really captured the struggle against apartheid in a time when the liberation was actually very far off. And it just shows the bravery and the resoluteness of these writers, many of whom were banned, some of whom were assassinated, many who had to flee into exile and died cold and lonely, far away from the bright blue sky and the blazing sun of South Africa and of the warmth of their loved ones. But they were all dedicated to telling their own truth in their own literary forms, and it was very sobering and gorgeous, and absolutely loved this. Right, the next one I don't actually have a copy of, and that is Unreliable Memoirs by Clive James. What an amazing book this was. I really loved it. Clive James had an extraordinarily interesting life. He grew up in rural Sydney in the post-war years. His father was killed in World War II, and he never met his father. And he was a very unruly kid. He was very precocious, but he was real firebrand, little rebel. His poor single mother just struggled to contain him, and he survived the very poisonous snakes and the sort of backwater mentality of post-war rural Australia, and somehow made his way across to the UK and to Cambridge, and just flowered into this dazzling literary career in which he published dozens and dozens of books of criticism, poetry, fiction. He also became a TV star. This random kid from backwater Australia became one of the kind of the spokesman of mid-20th century British criticism. Quite astounding, really. And he became a TV personality and wrote and directed and starred in many shows in late 20th century British TV. So what an interesting career. Also co-wrote music albums. I've listened to several of them. Pretty cool stuff. So what a varied and expansive career Clive James had. But Unreliable Memoirs is about those early formative years, under the age of 10. I think it goes from his earliest memories up to his first taste of literature when he was an undergraduate in Sydney. And it's very funny, and it's very striking and irreverent and self-lacerating in the most heartwarming and riotous kind of way. And I just really loved it. And I've got a bunch more of Clive James's books. He also has an amazing book on the poet Philip Larkin called Somewhere Becoming Rain. I think that's the title. So definitely check out Clive James if you haven't heard of him. I'm currently reading his translation of The Divine Comedy, which was his magnum opus, the kind of crowning work of his career. I can hear that my little boy is starting to wake up, so I'm going to crack on and try and finish this recording. I've got two more. I've got Dean Young. It's a selected poems. It's Bender, new and selected poems, a big thick collection of Dean Young's poetry. I'll leave a link to the video in which I talked about his work. This was a reread for me as well, but Dean Young is so slept on. He is so underappreciated. He is this transgressive, zany, surreal, cartoonish exuberance of freewheeling, freestyling, free verse poetry in the best kind of American idiom, very wry and self-flagellating and self-satirizing, but like I said, very much with a surrealist dimension to it. I think the best thing I can do with Dean Young is just to read a snippet of a poem or one of his poems to you. So this one is called Original Monkey. I'm working on my vanishing point. I'm practicing my zenith. I used to rely on a piece of glass to plunge into my heart, but that's nothing compared to my monkey. Usually we meet on a bench by the whortleberries to weep and watch the lambs disappear into the chasm. Hey, it's a rotten world for a monkey too. Just because you've got opposable thumbs doesn't mean you can untrip the trap. My monkey, though, is very self-involved, so when the glass doesn't work and the invisible girders are groaning and I can't get back to the old country of the great works of Western art restored to the luminosity of Looney Tunes, I call my friend who's drunk again, like me and my moonbeam. Wrong answer. Wrong ballistics report. Wrong club membership. Wrong draconian countermeasure. Wrong emergency room where the client in the party hat blinking blood says, it's nothing, it's nothing. I'll be the judge of that. My agony is no sillier than yours, even if it's riding a tiny unicycle. All I'm asking is for a fellow monkey to accompany my original monkey in his bridal sadness. Once he was one among many in a tree. Once my piece of glass was part of a larger piece of glass, which was part of a larger piece of glass, which was... Okay, you get the point. As if back there somewhere was something immense and intact. Absolutely gorgeous. That movement between registers, that wildly spinning and trembling vocabulary with all of its nooks and crannies. This was a phenomenal reread, just as good the second time around as the first. So definitely check out Dean Young if you haven't, unfortunately. Sadly, he died not so long ago, about a year or two ago, of a heart failure, and he had trouble with his heart for many years, and he sort of mythologizes and versifies that experience beautifully in many of his poems, his battles with his heart and all of the metaphorical richness and symbolic multiplicity of that image and of that body part. And then finally, to end off, this is the 10th of my top 10 favorite books of 2024, and it is Zadie Smith, Changing My Mind. Occasional essays. Absolutely love this. Zadie Smith is my favorite kind of critic. She is a novelist critic. She is really an artist of the literary form, and she brings to bear that incredible acumen and mastery to her criticism. She is what I aspire to be, in terms of, not that I ever tried to, definitely not trying to compare myself to Zadie Smith in any way, but I aspire to her way of thinking, in terms of she is a rigorous critic, but she's also obsessively literary. She's clearly deeply devoted. She's an adherent, a lifelong adherent to the power and the art of literature and the tradition of literature and the English language, and she brings that obsessive dedication to bear on her criticism, because she knows everything about her subjects. If she's talking about Vladimir Nabokov, as she does in this collection, or David Foster Wallace, she has an amazing, redeeming essay on David Foster Wallace, which is very brave, going against the grain of the kind of popular dismissiveness of Wallace. She does this massive 40-50 page deep dive into his most contentious work, Brief Interviews with Hideous Men, and just so revealing and fair and multi-vocal in her appraisal of that work and of his work. E.M. Forster, amazing essay on him. Middlemarch, Kafka, also a bunch of other things like on film, and some more memoirish pieces, but everything she does If she's writing about Ian Forster or Nabokov, she's read all of the letters, she's read all of the diaries, she's read the whole body of work, she's read probably a bunch of top commentary on those writers, and she just brings all of that wealth of and depth of reading to bear on what she writes about, and it's so invigorating, it's so inspiring. Love Zadie Smith, and haven't talked about her enough on this channel, but we're gonna get around to her, and I absolutely loved Changing My Mind. So those were my top 10 reads of 2024. I can hear my little boys just starting to wake up, so we've just about done it in time. Thank you all for being here this year, my first 9 months or something like that of this channel. It's been so much fun. It's been inspiring. I've had an amazing reading year, and I think it's largely due to the enthusiasm of you guys. What are your top 10 reads of the year? I would love to hear from you. Thanks for inspiring me to keep reading and go deeper and deeper into this amazing world of glowing, illuminative, empowering, revitalizing, hallucinogenic gorgeousness that is literature. I hope everyone has an amazing end to the year, and very much look forward to 2025, a year of fantastic reading. Thanks very much for watching, and speak to you all soon.